Sunshines and Lighthouses by Madalynn, read by Bob Wess. Watching the tide roll in, judging by the waves seeping up, splashing against his feet, it was peaceful. The sun casted through the clouds in the sky, a shadow from the lighthouse beyond him. A shimmering made him do a double take as he stopped dead in his tracks. It must have been a trick of the light because that shadow, shaking his head, no, that couldn't be. He took a shaky step forward, then another, going towards the familiar shadow. His steps were light as if he were levitating, a spell making him weightless with each step he took. The shadow grew the closer to the lighthouse he got. It grew taller and wider, different levels of shimmering casted from behind the figure. Dean broke out into a run, trying to catch up to the figure before they disappeared, like most things in his life. It couldn't be true. "Cass!" His voice scratchy yet deep, sturdy as he called out for him again, the shimmering becoming more solid the closer he came. The figure glimmered as he turned towards the sound. Dean picked up his speed to reach this person, this angel. Dean ran into the figure, smoke slipped through his fingers, grasping, shaking as he called for him again, wanting this to be true, needing it to be true. Dean. It was only a whisper before the shimmer evaporated in front of him. He heard his name before he reached the sand, the waves splashing against the shore loudly, muffling the calls that he could just barely hear. His name a song to his ears from the deepness of voices that broke through. Within a few feet, he could see the figure just on the other side of the lighthouse, his arms open, spread wide. Dean was sprinting, pushing his muscles to reach speeds that he hasn't in years. This wasn't pleasant by any means. He could see him, clearer now. He wasn't just a black shimmering figure, turning towards the sound of his voice being called. Dean could see the color of his trench coat billowing in the sand. A smile broke out across Dean's face, squinting towards the sky before he took inventory of his surrounding area. Dean barreled into Castiel, losing his footing before they tumbled to the ground in their haste to latch onto each other. Dean. Cass spoke breathlessly, still husky as he always said his name. All Dean could do was watch the angel form words. He breathed, trying to gather his thoughts as he watched the angel tilt his head, the movement so much like he had seen a dozen times. Dean couldn't take the intensity of his gaze before he dropped his head down to the crook of his neck, seeking comfort with the little gesture. Breathing in his scent, ozone and fresh air mixed with the salt of the ocean. "Lighthouse," he gasped. He felt Castiel tilted the other way, more in question and more in confusion. "Yes, there appears to be a lighthouse a few feet from where we're laying." Grunting, not truly knowing where he was going with this, he leaned his head into the other's, wanting to encourage and gather his thoughts, seeking comfort in his warmth. "Dean," Castiel spoke, but there was something in his voice. Dean lifted his head before he caught the worried look in his eyes. "I don't have much time," Castiel was quiet. "The empty doesn't know I'm gone." Before Dean could utter another word to counteract that statement, a loud splash broke the quiet serenity of the little island that they had made. Jumping to their feet, Castiel in front of Dean, protecting him again after sacrificing himself the countless times before. A woman with brown hair walked towards them, the water separating where she walked. The boys chanced glances towards each other, thinking the same thing. They will fight to the end. "Well, I see you've broken our deal," the empty voice echoed, making it creepier than it should be. Dean flashed back to the dungeon. This, right here, was the sunshine all along that Castiel wanted. Their sunshine. He wasn't going to let him lose that by some deal that he made protecting their kid when he had turned into God himself. Dean stood his ground, putting himself in front of Castiel, who only protested but wrapped an arm around him. Dean melted at the sentiment. "Yeah, well, deal's off," he countered, a piss-poor job at a comeback if Dean had ever heard one. She walked closer, the water still separating away from her. It was a true Moses' case happening here. Dean made a jib towards it, but it again fell short. He wasn't making his case at all here. The entity went on her scary speech while Dean only half listened. All he could think of was to protect Castiel, even if he had to sacrifice himself in order to do so. When a light bulb lit over his head, and he wondered if Castiel still had the power to read thoughts. Dean shushed the empty, quite rudely if he said so himself. If only Sammy could see him now. "Say we don't break your deal," Dean started, unsure if he should be making this decision without discussing it with Castiel first. "Dean, no," Castiel spoke from behind him. "I won't let you be taken instead of me." Dean looked back towards him, seeing the rays of sun casting a halo above his head. He watched it before bringing his hand up towards his cheek, cupping it softly, his head automatically going to his. "Take us both," Dean spoke steadily, words whispered between two people as it reached towards the other person privy to this conversation. "I won't leave him again." He turned towards the empty, holding Castiel's hand behind his back. Then you get your deal, and... He paused for dramatic effect. You can say that you slayed the mighty Dean Winchester.